We were very naive, very ambitious, very entrepreneurial. We came up with this amazing idea. And it was like this game show. And we went and pitched it to the commissioning editor at the time. And then she's like, so, do you guys have an office? We're like, no. Do you have a company that's registered? Like, no. But we've got a great name. And we've got a great idea.
I am an African. Africa, where it all began. The cradle of humankind. Rich in culture. Diversity of resources. The silver, the gold, and its people. Legacy, passing down something of value. Resources, ideas, information from one generation to another.
There cannot be any success in your lives without the willingness to live with what you regard as inconceivable.
African Legacy Project. They inspire and build.
Tenacity, patience, passion, creativity, and a whole lot of determination are some of the things that make for a great entrepreneur. Co-founder of the Creative Counsel, Gil Oved, has had his fair share of failure. With 2 failed businesses under his belt, he never gave up. And today, Gil Oved runs the largest sales and marketing solutions company on the African continent. He shares his story, his journey, and shares his legacy. This is African Legacy Project.
My name is Gil Oved, and I'm the co-CEO of the Creative Counsel Group. People talk about, when did I decide that I wanted to be an entrepreneur? And the irony is I was an entrepreneur well before I even knew the term. My dad, he'd say, bite off more than you can chew, and then chew like hell. And I've been doing that my whole life. I first experienced working life as a teenager on a TV program called Zap Mag, which was a youth magazine program at the time. And I was a TV presenter, and even though for many years I'd wanted to be on TV, I realized as soon as I got onto TV that actually what I really wanted to be doing is to be behind the scenes, directing, running the show, having control over what gets said and what gets done and how things are shot and everything. And so as soon as I left school, I decided I wanted to have a TV production company. And I did that with a business partner who was a co-presenter on the show. And it's so weird because a couple of years into that, someone said to me, oh, so you're an entrepreneur, when I described what I was doing. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's what it's called, entrepreneurship. Okay, I'm an entrepreneur. And that's the thing, very often you decide you want to be a master of your destiny, you want to be the director of your life, you want to take control, and it just so happens to be this thing called entrepreneurship. In terms of what I know and what I remember, all I know is Johannesburg. That's where I was bred. And my earliest memories are from a place quite close to Edenvale, which people who don't know is the east of Johannesburg. I came from a very loving, very warm family of immigrants. I've got one sibling, a sister called Maya, who's 5 years my junior, and grew up in a happy home. We're a family of 4, and so it's been a very tight-knit relationship. We're very close to each other. We're very involved in each other's lives, sometimes too involved, but I like it. Education was very important at home. My dad's an engineer, my mother's a teacher. It's a crazy combo. I never studied for exams without either my mom or my dad helping me, sitting with me, just because I like that company. In fact, it got ridiculous. On weekends, studying for matric exams or even into my varsity years, what was cool is that we always had adult conversations amongst the family. We used to talk about serious things from a young age. And so I was exposed to a lot, which I think aided me tremendously as I grew up. And in fact, even in my now adult years, it hasn't ended. So I have the pleasure of working with my dad, who is now a consultant to the Creative Counsel. And it's actually quite funny because if you ask him, he'll say that ever since he retired, he hasn't worked harder. And I'm kind of proud of that, so that's pretty cool. I don't come from an entrepreneurial family, and yet I always intuitively wanted to be an entrepreneur, and failed first time, failed a second time, and by that time I was already well into my 20s, and you would have expected that my parents would come and say, listen, you know, maybe it's time you go and go get a job. You know, go for an interview, get a job, and they didn't. Even though they weren't entrepreneurs in their lives, they said, you know what, if this is what you want to do, pursue it. You've got a home, you've got a bed, make things happen. What I really wanted to do was to have a TV production company. I was enamored by production. And so myself and a co-presenter on the TV show Zapbag, who was also a very good friend, we decided to start a company together. And we thought, what a great opportunity to bring his background and mine together. And him being Swazi and me Jewish, the Jew, the Swati, Juwazi. So the name of the TV production company was Juwazi. It was actually very cool. It was like this very cool logo of the two of us sitting on our name. And we got Zapiro back then, 20 years ago, to actually draw the logo for us by hand. And we were very naive, very innocent, very hungry, very ambitious, very entrepreneurial. And we decided, well, yeah, we've got a great name, and I guess that's a good start for a company. We're gonna go and pitch a TV program to the SABC, and we came up with this amazing idea. We were gonna have a mini gladiator show for kids. We were gonna call it Super Kids, with a Z in the end. And it was like this game show, and we would bring schools to come and compete, and it was an amazing idea. We had no idea how to actually execute against it. We went and pitched it to the commissioning editor at the time, and we were I'll never forget, we were like standing there pitching it to her, and she's like looking at us, and at the end of it, she like let us talk, and then she's like, so, do you guys have an office? And we're like, no. She's like, do you have staff? We were, no. Do you have a company that's registered? Like, no. Bank account? No. VAT number? No. But we've got a great name and we've got a great idea. And I was like ready to walk out. I was like, oh my goodness, this is so embarrassing. And kind of like, as we were like starting to shuffle and move, she's like, you know what? I'm not sure why I'm gonna do this, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna give you a chance. But don't mess this up. We shot it in the biggest studio in South Africa. We had multiple camera setups. We got sponsorship on board. It was a really incredible experience. And for two young guys, 19-year-old and a 21-year-old, it was actually unfathomable. But we pulled it off. And we had no idea what we were doing. And we'd have to pretend. And at the end of it, things worked. And I learned from that very often you have to act as if, and so it shall become. And that was how we started. And we were as shocked as anyone. And I guess very often, one of my takeouts from that is that very often people believe in you way more than you believe in yourself. And ironically, they're often right. You start off not knowing anything, and ultimately you become an expert. And you just have to go head in. I think back to my very first mentor, Louise Smith. She was a creative genius and a brilliant entrepreneur. She was the creator of Pumpkin Patch, Willy Varley, Lever Hixie, and Zapmag. And when I was 19, I decided to start a TV production company, my first venture. And I'll never forget her wise words to me. She said, in business, you need two types of balls. One, a set of steel balls, and two, a crystal ball, so that you can look into the future. I'm very often out of my comfort zone as I grow and learn. And so too, I have to fake it a little or a lot. Fake it till I make it, and I have to act as if, and then it becomes. So the production company was very successful, and it ran for about 3 years. And the thing about production is that it's tough. It's tough, and you're only as good as your last production, and 1 minute you're king, and next minute you pauper. There's production, and then there's the business of production. I just didn't like the business of production. The world was changing because this new thing appeared, and everywhere you look, everywhere you read, the internet. And all of a sudden there were these IT millionaires, youngsters, my age, making bombs, almost like what is now for social media and stuff like that. That was the internet back in the late 90s. And I just thought, wow, I'm an entrepreneur, I've got to get in on this action, I've got to pioneer this. And I thought, gee, production's great, but there's a new kid in town, and it's called the internet, and it was part of the boom. I just wish I knew that it would also have a bust.
How do you feel about the award so far?
Very disappointed, very upsetting.
Oh, come on! The ultimate entrepreneur award. Here it is, right here.
Ran and I met when I was 15. We both met in high school. We just happened to be in the same class. And one day, his mother overheard him speaking to me on the phone and heard a new name, asked about me, and he's like, no, he's a new friend of mine. And his mother recognized my surname, and we worked out that my dad knew her in varsity 40 years earlier. Crazy story. And things all come full circle, don't they? It's 1998, and TV production's waning and internet's on the rise. And so a friend of mine from high school and I get together and we start chatting. And he was a very, very experienced stockbroker, having been a stockbroker for a sum total of 6 months. And so we set about putting together a business plan for 6 months. With no money coming in, working on this thing. Online day traders could go online, share information and reports and do real-time share trading. It was the big thing. We were on the verge of launching. The site was amazing. Within a few months, we raised a few million rand and set about developing this thing, which in our estimation would have taken 6 months. Well, it took us 2.5 years to get developed. Project creep, lack of experience, all of these things contribute to these problems. And it took us 2.5 years of very hard work. We were on the verge of launching. The site was amazing. And just before we launched, the company that had invested in us, the company that 2.5 years earlier was on a huge boom, bust. And in the process, we lost everything. We lost money, we lost time, we lost the software, we weren't able to launch it, and it was a very dark time. It was 2.5 years wasted. Our dreams, our aspirations, our credibility and reputation all gone down the drain. And there we were, mid-20s, thinking, wow, well, don't have much money, and we've got nothing to show for all this time that we've invested, and now what do we do from here? The failure of Wealthmaker was a devastating time in our lives. Probably the darkest time I've ever had, filled with self-doubt, bordering on, I guess, depression to some extent, wondering, maybe entrepreneurship is not for me, actually. And very demoralizing, the whole experience. And I guess out of all of that, in retrospect, all the learnings that I'd had up until that point actually led me to start the Creative Counsel, which is ultimately what led to our great success. So, in retrospect, breakdowns are very often breakthroughs. And even if you don't see it then, if you think about it in retrospect, it's very often the case. And obviously it wasn't the first breakdown, and there've been many since. But what wisdom gives you and experience gives you is that it teaches you that when you do have a breakdown, that usually you'll see it as a breakthrough eventually. And that's what happened with the Creative Counsel. We were sitting around thinking about what to do, and we realized one thing. We want to be in partnership with each other, myself and my business partner, Run, and we wanted to remain being entrepreneurs, masters of our destiny, directors of our lives. And then it was about finding something that we could get passionate about. And actually we stumbled on to the idea of the Creative Counsel. Run's girlfriend was a first-year law student who was placing promoters for extra money. And we had all these degrees and all this experience as entrepreneurs, and she was making more money than us. We were like, this could be something to do. Maybe a low barrier to entry business, cash generative. And we kind of always thought that it would be the thing that pays for the petrol to get us to the office, to let us work out what we really want to do with our lives. And it just so happened that next thing we were on the verge of an industry that was metamorphosing, and we were right in the middle of it. And I guess a lot of luck and tenacity changed our fate.
Oh, we've won every single business award, isn't it? And how does it feel? Crazy. So it's like, I'd like to say I'm living the dream, but I've actually exceeded every dream that I've ever had.
I think partnerships are very tough because you've got two people who have a very strong vested interest. Very often their lives, their families' lives are dependent on the success of the business, and business is tough, and therefore partnerships are tough. And very often partnerships fail, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there isn't enough communication. And I think the reason for the success of our partnership over 20 years of doing business together is that we've communicated a lot with each other. We're on the phone to each other 10 times a day, realigning, doing mini realignments all the time, making sure that we're on the same path, challenging each other. And the second thing is honesty. I think honesty and trust is imperative. You cannot do anything without that. Integrity, openness, candor, and knowing when to push back, knowing when to be honest and say, I don't like what you're doing. I'm not in agreement here. We have a philosophy that we have to have healthy, heated debate. And healthy means that you play the ball, not the person, but it's got to be heated, because that's when the magic happens. When you feel passionate about something and you debate things, you should be welcoming it. Embrace it. And then when that happens, magic happens as well. Run's greatest strength is that he's a doer. He makes things happen. He's got the most incredible tenacity. He just simply doesn't let go. He doesn't understand the word no. He doesn't like it. And he's got such a strong view of what he deserves and needs that he will do whatever it takes to get there. It's an incredibly powerful force, very hard to stand in the way of that incredible force. And obviously having that in your partnership is excellent. He's actually a true entrepreneur, because he'll often come and say, what if we ... without necessarily thinking of all the obstacles and the problems that may arise by trying it. And I think that's kind of like that kind of attitude of go make things happen, don't think about it too much. When you get there, you'll sort it out. That's like kind of like the real essence of entrepreneurship. We've had ups and downs, makeups and breakups as any relationship. But the way I guess both of us have always seen it is that we've got a baby together. And whether we like it or not, we're both the parents of this child that needs to grow up and grow up in a healthy environment. We both want the best for this child, and that's why we've got to work things out no matter what. And that's always been our approach. What's been interesting now is that we've had to let this child start living its own life and ultimately move out of home. I've met so many different entrepreneurs, and you've got some who get married young and some who get married old, but there's this thing about people who feel like, I've got to achieve everything before I settle down and everything like that. And I think to some extent, I thought that for a while, but I actually feel that you need to live every day in the present. And as an entrepreneur, you don't often do that, especially when you're a startup entrepreneur. You're always worried about the next minute. And to some extent, I guess that's understandable because you're surviving. You're fighting for survival, and that's why you've got to keep hustling. But at the same time, I actually think that for me, I wish I'd spent more time living in the present and doing things now. And, be it having, gotten married earlier or, moving into my own place earlier. These are things that I did at a late stage. And, if it availed itself again, in retrospect, I think that I would have taught myself to live more in the present, because you never know when you're checking out, do you? It's the one thing that everyone else will know about you but you, your checkout date. I took some time in getting married, having gotten married at the age of 41. But I think I did it right. I've always had a very fulfilling life in everything I did. And so I didn't pursue marriage for the sake of it. I thought if I found someone that I want to spend the rest of my life with, that would be great, but it's not absolutely critical. And then I found my wife, and I realized that we've got an incredible connection. She's vastly different from me. She's supremely superior to me. And her interests are in some ways aligned and in other ways completely different. And that enamors me, and that diversity of thinking excites me and challenges me. And so I thought, this is the kind of person I want to grow old with. And we had an incredible wedding, but more importantly, we've so far had a really great life together, not just the months that we've been married, but the years that we've been dating. And this is an individual who lives her own life, who has huge aspirations and dreams independently of mine. I didn't expect for life to change when I got married, because we'd been together for a few years, and yet something does change. And I think for me what it's been is like this realization that this is it, and you got to make it work. And you're building something, and you're building something forever. And that sense of gravitas, that sense of importance has been very fulfilling, actually, because you realize that what you're doing is about more than just yourself. It's about being half of a whole and building plans together and growing and learning together. And that's been great. I think being the spouse to an entrepreneur is very difficult. The entrepreneur is a doctor on call, regardless of the industry. You're always on. You're always available. And that's just how it is. And I think it could be very frustrating for a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or a husband or wife. And I guess the question is, are you the kite or are you the crutch? And that's a decision that in the relationship you kind of need to make. And the right relationships are one where an entrepreneur needs all the support they can get. They need patience, they need understanding, because there is just so much that goes on in the entrepreneur's head. There is no such thing as a 9 to 5. There is no such thing as a job spec. There is no such thing as a role and a title. You are everything to everyone. You're a master of all trades. 1 minute, you're worrying about who bought, coffee and milk for the office because there isn't any, and the next minute you're closing a big deal. Next thing, the client's not. This is the life of an entrepreneur who is discovering every day a new path. They're carving a new road, and so it could be frustrating, it could be tough, it could be challenging and irritating. They'll let you down because they can't make it to the romantic dinner that you had planned, or for me, there were so many situations where I missed anniversaries and birthdays and weddings and weekends away, and my friends were going out and I'd be working. And it's a labor of love. It's a doctor on call scenario. And only the right partner, the right spouse would appreciate that and support that. The one thing that my wife has taught me has been the importance of introspection. I've been the kind of person who has been obsessed with go, 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 and look at the next thing and the next thing, and don't slow down, don't waste time. And actually, I've lost out on a lot as a result of it. I haven't taken time to appreciate where I'm at, to be grateful sufficiently for what I have, to celebrate success, to ponder over my next few moves, to take some time to introspect, to relax, to calculate. And so my wife has taught me the importance of doing that. And as a result, I think that my life is so much richer because I get to appreciate things around me. I get to live more in the present. And even in terms of the future, I get to plan it more because I take more time to think, I take more time to meditate, I take more time to be grateful. The Creative Counsel is a sales and marketing solutions company, the largest one in Africa. It works on enticing consumers to change the way they act or transact, and we do it in a variety of mediums. Everything from strategy to creative design, activation, branding, marketing, promotions, field marketing, social media, and everything in between. It's a one-stop shop that fulfills the idea of getting products into stores and onto shelves, and then getting products off shelves and into consumers' hearts, minds, and homes. So many people have asked us, what is the building? Is it a spaceship? Is it a factory? What did you want to say with it? And I always think of Seal, the musician. Because Seal initially used to have his lyrics in his albums, and eventually he stopped printing the lyrics, and people asked him why. And he told the story that when he'd release a great song, he'd hear people singing along to it, and they'd get all the words wrong. And his initial temptation would be to say to them, "You've got it all wrong, this is not what I meant." And then he would stop himself because he'd realize that once it's in the ether, the meaning is different for different people, and whether they sing the right lyrics or the wrong lyrics, as long as it has some meaning to them, that's what's important. We're an activation agency. We're about experiences. We're about making you feel something. And the building is a manifestation of that approach, of that culture. And our argument when we put the building together, when we signed off on the architectural design, was that it must be something that makes people feel something. Preferably, they should love it, and it's okay if they hate it. What's unacceptable, what would be a failure, was if they felt nothing for it. A lot of people see this big building and all of a sudden they hear a lot about the Creative Counsel, and very few people realize how it started. And actually, it started with myself and my business partner, two-man show. Started in a tiny little office in the middle of nowhere with a borrowed computer and literally mugs from home. And that was the beginning of our lives and our careers. We didn't know what we were doing. I was calling clients, potential clients, off the yellow pages, literally. In those days, there wasn't even Google. It wasn't the internet properly. The internet was like the slow thing that you logged on to once a day. And so we had yellow pages, and I'd go into supermarkets and take products off the shelf and look at the back of the products to see which company owns the brand, and then go and phone the company. And in fact, I learned a little trick. So what I would do is I'd phone the company and ask for the CEO. Push, try to get to the CEO, and then finally when I got through to the CEO or MD, I tell them that I'm this agency, amazing agency, we want to do promotions and activations, and will they give us a chance? Obviously, the immediate answer is either no, or this isn't my thing. You should speak to the marketing director, which is all I needed, because then I'd phone the marketing director and say, hey, I just spoke to the CEO, he told me I must speak to you. That's what opened doors, and then I'd get meetings. I'd be incredibly tenacious, persistent. I'd get to know the name of the PA and find out her story, and I'd log it all onto a spreadsheet. So by the time that she may say no the first time, the second time, the third time, by the fourth time, she'd be so tired of me that she'd just set up a meeting for me just to get me off her chest, and that's all I needed. And so this is how we built up our business, learning along the way. And the one thing we realized is we were in this industry, which was a creative industry, but both myself and Run were numbers people. Both of us are chartered financial analysts. We love numbers, we love stats and graphs and charts. And all of a sudden we introduced this element to an industry that was largely just this creative, picture book album kind of thing. And all of a sudden we came with sales returns and return on investment conversations, things that are very common now, but in those days were quite novel. Others would come in with big posters, we'd come in with laptops. In those days, that made all the difference. And I guess that's kind of always been our approach. We've got this philosophy that if you're going into a knife fight, take a grenade. We love winning by a mile. If someone asks you for one idea, we'd bring them two. If they want this, we give them that. Always go the extra mile, never say no. We can do anything. So we became the go-to guys. Like when all else failed, people would call us and we'd make a plan. When everyone else said no, we would say yes. And that kind of hungry, aggressive approach enamored our clients to us. We would love their brands. We would be more passionate about the brands they worked on than they were. We'd live and breathe it, and they appreciated it. On Saturday mornings, when we ran promotions, I would go every single weekend, Saturdays and Sundays, to stores, and I would make sure to phone my clients. Very often they wouldn't answer, which is just as well. I'd be phoning them and I'd leave them a message telling them what I'm seeing, what's working, what's not. I wanted them to know that whilst they're lying in bed, still sleeping off a Friday night drinking binge, I was in the supermarket looking at their campaign, their brand, and I was the custodian. It's that kind of passion that allowed us to grow. It's what we instilled in the people below us. And that's how we managed to grow to this big business. We had a philosophy that everything we did had to stay in the microeconomy of the business. So the less we outsourced, the more we could bring in, the more we could churn the money within the organization, the better, because we had an idea that we wanted to build wealth in the business. We didn't care about the immediate money. We weren't interested in a lifestyle business. We wanted to build a scalable business that ultimately we could exit, either list or sell, but that it would be a company that had equity in it, that it would have IP, that it would have scalability, that it would have management infrastructure. So we reinvested a lot of the money that we made back into the business to grow our people, to grow our systems, to grow our processes, to grow the IP. So that is the one thing that both Run and I always had a very aligned vision on. Regardless of how we got there, we knew we wanted to build a big business, a scalable business full of IP. when you start your business, you're so busy chasing survival. And then when you're moving beyond survival, the next step is growth. And then beyond that, it's scale. And then you get to a point where all of a sudden you wake up one day, you wouldn't have even noticed it, and all of a sudden you've got this big company, hundreds, thousands of people working for you, and you take a moment and you realize it. And for me, it happened when Publicis approached us to buy us. Publicis is the most incredible company with a huge history and background, been around for 90 plus years. They're the third largest communications group in the world. When they approached us to buy us, our first question is, who's Publicis? We'd been so involved in our own little world that we didn't know what was out there. We didn't even look. And when we were approached, we were like, oh, wait a minute. When we started off, we were the ugly duckling. We were this little tiny nothing. We became this beautiful swan, or so it seemed. Use that analogy in terms of business. And all of a sudden, we were desirable for big companies to buy us. And that's when I realized that, wow, we actually have something. Clearly what they brought into us was not just the systems, processes, and IP of the business, but the culture that we had created, this hungry, entrepreneurial, pioneering culture. The day we closed the deal, the group CEO, a legend in the advertising world, a guy called Maurice Levy, sent us an email. And one would normally expect that he would talk about how important it is to merge with the culture of the organization and to, follow systems and all of that. And he didn't say any of that. He said one line. He said, congratulations, now don't lose your entrepreneurship. I remember receiving this and going like, wow, it's amazing, how unexpected. But clearly what they brought into us was not just the systems, processes, and IP of the business, but the culture that we had created, this hungry, entrepreneurial, pioneering culture. So here we are at the Ananda Polo Club. Yes. We're about to go in. Already people have started walking in, and we two are nominated. He's one of 3 people who decides our fates.
Yeah. We interviewed the guys. Obviously, amazing business. We all know the history of the business. Great contestants in the group. Obviously, I can't say anything right now. In the next, hour or two, we'll all know the results. All I can say is that every single person who entered this particular award deserves to appear.
And there's no such thing as second place. I mean, there's no such thing as a loser here. It's just second place.
Oh, wow. Who came up with that?
Hey, see you inside. I think entrepreneurs never really set out to win awards and accolades. It's very rarely the reason someone gets into entrepreneurship. And for so many years, it didn't even come into the picture in any way or form. Winning awards and accolades is incredibly humbling, very often surprising. The competition with many of these awards was very tough, so pleasant surprises. And I guess it is important to be recognized for what you've done. And I think it's important to actually take a moment, if you win the awards or not, take a moment regularly to look at your achievements, what you've done, and talk to yourself. Like say, hey, you're okay. You're not so bad. You're doing well. Keep going. Be grateful for what you've got. Could be so much worse. And cool, then move on and go forward. And so that's always been my attitude. Never done anything in order to win an award, but I'm very grateful for it. I'm very humbled by it. It's flattering. It's fun. Africa has an incredible, growing, blossoming tech scene. GrowTech has been an incredible experience for me. It's one of the largest venture capital tech funds in the country. And I was asked if I'd be interested in joining the board as a non-exec. I love technology, but know very little about it. And I'd never sat on the board of a fund. I was quite humbled that they would want me, but they felt that they needed marketing expertise and kind of vigor and energy, the kind of energy that they felt that I would bring, and I was really honored. And it's been an incredible journey, a very exciting one. And so these guys, sitting as executives on the board, get to spend every day, all day, meeting young, hungry entrepreneurs with clever ideas, and we get to decide if we fund these guys. And I feel very passionately about entrepreneurship on the continent, and specifically in the technology sphere. I think it's important that Africans start finding African solutions to African problems instead of waiting for the Americans, Europeans, or the Chinese to come and do it. And so we need to support entrepreneurs here, and GrowTech has been doing that. That said, as much as I love technology, and I really do, I'm very concerned that we're not having enough conversations about the woes of technology, the risks that technology brings to our lives. Gartner research predicts that by the year 2025, which is in 8 years' time, 1/3 of all jobs in the world will be lost to technology as a result of things like driverless cars, drones, 3D printing, contour framing, robots, AI, big data. And so this is very scary. And it's not just the blue-collar jobs that are at risk. It's very often the white-collar jobs, like accountants and auditors and doctors and nurses. All are at risk because of new technologies. That is a huge disruptor. The tech scene in Africa is still very primitive and has a long way to go. If you look at entrepreneurial cities around the world, San Fran, London, Tel Aviv, Singapore, these are environments where there is a robust, comprehensive ecosystem that covers everything. And what it means is that an entrepreneur with hunger and a good idea has everything at his fingertips. Access to finance, mentorship, network. It's robust, it's developed, it's sophisticated. And then you come here and really we are just starting off. For an entrepreneur to make it in Africa, in the tech scene, there are so many hoops to get through. I would like young Africans to know that they are sitting at the epicenter of the future growth of the world's GDP. And what a wonderful place that is to be at. And I want them to immerse themselves in it. You have to become so resilient, so good. You have to become a master of so many trades that by the time you do achieve success, you are a brilliant entrepreneur who's incredibly well trained at getting through problems and solving problems with solutions. And so I'm encouraged by that. And the thing about technology is that it is so scalable and so leapfroggy in nature, in that we can see things happening anywhere in the world, learn about them, adopt them, apply them, improve on them, reapply them to our needs, and make a lot of money in the process. When you realize that a kid in Shoshanguve has the same access to information as a kid in Seattle, for the first time in man's history, it's the great leveler. So I think we're going to see major seismic tectonic changes happening in the next couple of decades as access to information kind of equalizes. Smartphone costs are coming down, data charges are coming down, people are experiencing connectivity for the first time on the phone, even in the most rural of areas in Africa. And now this is going to bring online masses of people with new ideas and new ways of thinking. And I think that's very exciting. I had this dream and I pursued it relentlessly until it became a reality. And what I didn't realize is that actually that was my first lesson of entrepreneurship. There's so many do's and don'ts about entrepreneurship that I just wish I could share all my learnings, and I'm still learning so much. But I would say if you're an entrepreneur, get out there. So the first thing is, whatever the idea is, start doing it. Fail fast and move on. Roll with the punches. Tomorrow's another day. You need to become a voracious reader of information, become an expert in the industry that you are in. The best thing you could ever do is embrace the word why. Ask it a lot. You know, when you were a kid, you wanted sweets, and your mother would say, no. You say, why? She'd say, because you've eaten already. And you say, why? And you carry on. That's what entrepreneurs should be doing. Why? And in fact, add another word to that. Why not? And that's when the magic happens, when you start answering those problems. The world has so many problems. So start your questions with, wouldn't it be cool if some of the best, biggest companies started with a simple question of, wouldn't it be cool if? If you're an entrepreneur, go out and network. Meet people and expose yourself. Don't be scared. Share contact details. You never know when the person to your right on the plane could be your next investor, your next partner, your next supplier, your next client. Be open. Be open to meeting and interacting. I'd love to be remembered for someone who made a difference, cared for the people around him, and changed the world in a very small way. There could be no greater honor in one's business life than creating employment for others. I've had the huge privilege of creating tens of thousands of jobs, and I feel that my work has only just begun. My legacy is growing and inspiring and creating jobs for young entrepreneurs on the continent. And it's been a life's work that's actually just embryonic right now.